All right, welcome everybody. My name is Greg Bailey. I just got off another session. I am not standing at the podium, and obviously, I'm not doing any of these events because they've all recently been canceled up through August. So I'm sure most of you are working remotely. I know quite a few of you are in many parts of the world, from Saudi Arabia to the UK to other countries in Europe and to the United States of America here. So I do want to welcome you today. And I know in some cases it's late at night there. So again, really a pleasure to be able to talk to you. So today's session is going to be talking about resource communication between the PM and resource manager. We will dig into the product and actually show that today. Slightly different than the session we just got off, which was more talking with Donna Fitzgerald and process and capability maturity model. So just know many clients across the world where we work with many of them and their resource management process. Just some examples here of all the various companies that we work with. As we get into the session, we know that a lot of the people on this call are either using Excel or they may be using a PPM tool and they're doing scheduling. So two things I want to get into today. One is, how do you get communication between resource managers and project managers? There's many ways that we do that, even without a tool, but I will show you how we can allow you all to communicate either through a central view where you're doing what if scenario modeling, or if it's more of a remote environment, how people would put in or enter requests, and then after entering those requests, having it go to the resource manager and them approving and rejecting and all the traditional things that you might have that would help you automate that process. Now, when we look at why we want to have PMs and resource managers communicate, is that what are we trying to do, right? We're trying to look at all of the work that we have going on, all of the projects. Now, in some cases, you are doing, many of you are doing audits. So when I use the term projects, it could be audits that we're working on. Some of you I know on this call are in the engineering space, so you're delivering products. And then there are others on this call that are in IT that are delivering IT projects. But the whole idea is we need to be able to know and get the big picture. So when we're looking at all this projects that we've got going on, and we're looking at the resources that we've got, we need to be able to know, hey, where do we have the capacity to do this work? And so when we look at, for example, all this demand that's coming in, and I'm going to go do this little pen here. So we have all this demand that's coming in, right? So you have audits that you have to complete, you have projects working on, you have service requests happening. So again, various verticals that we've got on this call here. And you need to be able to now say, all right, I've got this request. I need resources to be able to deliver on that request. So how do we communicate that with all of this other stuff that we've got going on, and we're trying to deliver for the corporation itself? All right. So now when we take a look at it, and let me go, do me a favor here. Let me get off this tool. And we want to be able to go to looking at how we communicate, right? How did we get here? So again, in many cases, we always see a lot of talk about, well, to be able to communicate, we've got to be certified. Let's look at processes, and we've got all this data. And in many cases, people started out trying to use many of these PM tools that are in the market. Now, one of the things that we've seen is that a lot of people have tried to use these tools, and in many cases, they fall back on what they're comfortable with. So we're still seeing a lot of Excel in the marketplace. Now, again, nothing wrong with that, but it does not make it easy when you're using Excel to be able to share Excel files around, to be able to communicate between users. And in many cases, what we find is that, again, People have gone down the path of detailed project schedules. Again, I'm not dogging these at all. So, many of you are using a Microsoft project or another tool. Those are great tools to leverage and to be able to set that information up. They tend to be very detailed. But again, what we tend to find is that you've got all of these various PMs, each building their schedules, and how are they able to communicate that data to, they all have their requests, right? And they have all of the managers that are trying to fulfill those requests. And, we're always looking at how many projects can we do, how many proposals can we approve, how many people do we need to hire. And again, in today's environment, things have changed pretty dramatically, right? Because obviously we're working remote. Some projects have moved forward, some projects have been moved out. In some cases, staff has actually been reduced. And so we're really kind of in this whole mode now of, how do we deliver on this stuff and how do we communicate? And even if you do have a PMO, we can go, all right, we got all this data. Let's just go ahead and start building big Excel sheets. Let's start using Power BI. Let's start using Power Pivot. There's all kinds of things that we can do to enable to do that, but it tends to end up being so confusing and so difficult and very hard to kind of determine, hey, since we really can't, come up with a good answer, let's just confuse the whole process and, just give the answer we know that they're looking to do. So focusing on this resource management is critical, and being able to answer all these questions that people are asking you, because again, you've got, keep the lights on things happening. You've got projects that were in the pipeline. You're trying to still obviously focus on what your corporate strategy is, whether it's making a profit, delivering services to an external customer or internal customer. In many cases, these projects have changed. And then obviously sometimes in the case of your resource requirements, they've been reduced as well. So it's important to be able to, how are you going to be able to staff all that work that you've got going on? And again, being very critical, resource management is still very important. This is actually from Gartner. It's a hype cycle report. And what you're going to notice is that in many cases, on this left-hand side of the screen here, I'm going to go, again, use my pencil here a bit. Spotlight, there we go. Many people come up this process here. They might have PPM tools or a lot of systems. I see ServiceNow, other products in the market that they're using. They tend to have a pretty big disillusionment. And this is not necessarily me saying this. Again, this is a Gartner hype cycle report. So, high expectation, pretty big trough of disillusionment in getting those in place, especially for this resource to project manager communication. But there are ways to make it easier to get those resources to communicate with the PMs, and I'll kind of go into that with you now. All right, so let me go turn this off here. All right, let's turn the spotlight off. There we go. It takes a little bit for me to figure this whole thing out. Sorry about that. So, but it is critical to do it because you'll get a long-term value. Now, I'm not going to go into the fact that we're the what if. By the way, if you are using other systems, we can connect into them, what other tool it is. So for live case here now, I'm actually going to bring up, and I'm going to just ask one thing. If anyone on this audience here can raise your hand in the chat box, then at least I know you're hearing me okay, and you're seeing my screen all right as well. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you doing that for me. All right, so two key components I'm going to focus through right now is how do you automate the process of someone requesting a resource, that having resource managers approve it, and what's that cycle? So I'll go into that with you. And then also, as I mentioned, how are you able to say, communicate with the together where you say, I've got all this work that's taking place. I want to see where I'm over and under allocated. And then be able to do things like, in this case, let's just do a quick look, and I can see, for example, wow, I got a lot of people over allocated, but let's just say, for example, Allison's over allocated and you're working with the PM and you're going to try and say, hey, I need to find some other people that are available. that can accomplish that work. So, instead of Allison working on it, I could see Beverly's got some availability. So let's go ahead and put Beverly on that work instead. So I'll come back and show you this scenario planning, but let's just start out how resource requests would take place. So you're looking at Tempus Resource right now. It is an enterprise resource capacity planning tool. We obviously are going to start out with our resources. Now, in some cases, we're going to start out by requesting named people, right? So you've got a listing of your resources, or you may actually have folks that are requesting generic resources, right? So you might say, I need an auditor. I need a software engineer. I need a hardware engineer. I need someone from R&D. I need a clinical writer. So whatever it is you're requesting, you can request a generic resource or a named resource, and then have that request go to the functional manager. Now, in the system, you're going to be able to basically define these resources, but you're also going to be able to define who their resource managers are. So let me just kind of show you an example of that here. Let's go take a look at all right. If it's a timesheet user, we can do that as well. But we can define like who the resource managers are they resource manager, and then whether or not a resource requires an approver or not. So just know in the system, it's easy to set up that workflow approver, okay? Now, we can go into an individual demo with you. Just send me an email and we can set up a WebEx specific to your requirements. But let's go in now and say, hey, we have work taking place. Now, I have a number of different projects already set up, some that are kind of R&D type projects. I was at Estee Lauder in New York, and so some of these are from that. I've got some IT projects in here. I have some auditing projects in here. I have some projects in here related to audits. So just know, again, this can be used for any type of work that's taking place where you're requesting. So I'm just going to use an example. I'll just pick this particular project here. And let's say I've got a new project, and on this project, I have to request resources. Now, as I mentioned, I can either have it where I'm requesting a generic resource, right? Or I'm requesting a named resource. So whoever in your process is requesting a resource, they're going to be able to either request by quantity or FTE, and they can do it by, say I need, some of you are doing quarterly planning, some of you are doing monthly planning, some of you are doing weekly planning, some of you do daily. But again, in general, it's very simple to say I need this resource and I need 2 of them from here to here. All right, that's if you on this call do it by head count. Or some people do it by percentage of time. I need 50% of this generic resources time. Or some of you do it by hours. You specifically say, you know what? I need 100 hours of Lisa's time. So by entering your request, you're basically saying, on this project, I need these generic resources or this named person. Very simple. It's just like Excel. There's a lot of other ways that we can enter this request, but I'm just kind of giving you a general feel right now. This is how you just put the initial requests in, okay? And then you could say, great, that's the request I want. And if you notice, I can have, in this case, these requests have been sent off. Now, some of you do the requesting at this high level. Some of you do this requesting at a more detailed level. So for example, some of you kind of build schedules, So if you do it that way, you can get to more detailed as well. Some of you may be using a Microsoft project. You can also use that or another system and have those requests flow through as well. So however you do it, whether you're doing it at a high level or you're doing it at that more detailed level, Tempus can support that. So request goes in the system. We now have the case where that request flows to a manager. And again, I've shown you one example here, how that might actually take place. So that resource comes to the manager, and that manager can see the various requests that they have. Now, again, this was pre-set up, so I can see that I have one request for Greg. Again, if you remember, this could be a request for those generic resources. I need a PM. I need a senior auditor. I need a systems analyst. So you can be requesting generic resources as well. So now I can go in and look at this request. I have the ability to see how much either time they're looking from that manager. So someone's saying, hey, I need Greg for 64 hours. Or again, I need X percentage of Greg's time. Or I have this FTE that I need of Greg. I need a half of an FTE or whatever. So again, this request has come in. So now what can you do? One, you could just say, I approve that. Maybe I'll go down and look at Greg's schedule to see whether Greg's available or Greg's not available. Obviously, these people are over allocated. Or I can say, I reject it. Nope, you can't have Greg. Or, hey, this should be delegated to another manager. Really, this is not something I should deal with. Or you might say, I'm not going to give you Greg, all right, but I'm going to give you Abigail. Or I'm going to give you Abigail and Amy. So again, I can go through and look at my team and see who I've got available. And again, I'll just give you an example. Let's say I'm going to look at Abigail and Allison. I might say I'm going to give 20% of Abigail's time on this. And then maybe I'll, give 20% of Allison. So instead of giving it to Greg, I'm going to split the work between these two. Right? And so no longer will Greg be on this work, but I'm going to put the work on Abigail and Allison. Again, remember, this could be that generic resource, as I mentioned, a PM, a system analyst, a senior auditor, a hardware engineer. And so instead of the generic, I'm saying I'm going to give you these two resources. Main thing to show you, very simple, very easy, allows you to say, I've got a request coming in. I'm now going to fulfill that request. And then I can apply those changes, and then that data would be updated to the project itself. So if you think about your organizations, in some cases, that's the way you do it today, right? Someone is requesting a resource, it goes to a manager, and you need a way for them to fulfill the request. We make it very simple and very easy for you to automate that through this resource request process. Now, some of you have a different process there. And again, I'm giving you some examples here during this demo, and then you have the ability, we can do a follow-up with you on that. There are others where you've got a team that creates projects, and then you just tell the RMs, hey, I need you to go load those projects with your team because you know what it's going to take to do that work. So I do see a lot of times the resource managers going into these bulk project allocation screens. I have two different modes. I'll show you the flat grid. It's kind of more like just a flat Excel grid. And so in essence, what this does is the manager can go in and say, all right, I've got to go in and resource load maybe these two projects. These are two new projects that have come up. And I'm going to go assign my team, right? And if you notice, it builds a simple spreadsheet down below. And so now they could go in and say, all right, I'm going to go assign Amy, again, by FTEs or percentage of time, or hours, by quarter, by month. Again, I'm going to keep it a quarter, but it's real simple. But I could go in and say, I'm going to put Amy on this. Let's say I'm going to use 50 hours here. And I'm just going to kind of go, copy and paste. So if you notice, I'm basically assigning various resources, both Amy, Carolyn, and Christopher, to multiple projects. So, and I can have a heat map here as well. If I wanted to, I could have custom fields here that I fill out. Again, I don't have to do that, but just know, in fact, let's get rid of those attributes on this grid. Um, but just know you have the ability to look at other data on this grid. Think of it as just a big Excel sheet that I'm able to go in and do my work. Many of you are using Excel, so if you don't have the process of the resource request, this is going to allow you to go in and have your resource managers go in and do their resource assignments. Again, I see PMs doing this as well. It just is going to depend on your organization. The other bulk edit screen, so this is sort of just a flat grid. You're able to edit it. We do have some clients, when they're doing this editing, they'll use this bulk project allocation grid. The difference is, if you notice, I'm just going to add Amy to these projects. And so it's more of an expand and contract mode, right? And then I'm going to put Amy on this pure color envy. So I expand it. So where the other one was sort of a flat grid, it was all expanded at one time. This allows me to expand and contract. Again, there's no right or wrong way to enter this data. We just have, because we deal with so many global companies, and where they may have a small department doing resource planning, or they may be, doing resource planning for hundreds or even tens of thousands of resources. Some prefer this mode and some prefer the other mode. Again, purely personal preference. The main thing is we make it easy for you to get off of Excel and or communicate with your existing PM tool that you might have as well. So very, very simple there. And by the way, if you do have questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A box, and I'll try to answer those as I go along through this demo. Or again, pop me an email and we'll set up a specific one for you. We also have free trials. All right. So the key thing is that data is getting into the system, whether you're entering it directly in this mode, in the bulk mode, or as I mentioned, we may be pulling data in from a Microsoft project or a Microsoft project server or a Clarity or some other system, and you could have it kick off our resource request process, right, that we've got here. So however that happens, you can have now a system here where it's very simple for the resource managers to have that Excel-like user experience. Now, in many cases, I also see where, you all get together in meetings. Now, again, now we're seeing a lot more web-based meetings versus in-person meetings. So you might have the case where you all get together. Again, it could be you're not even requesting the resources. It's just everybody is entering the resources that they need. And so then you get together and say, all right, we've got all our requests in. So we have all these projects or audits now taking place. And so I want to find out where I am over allocated or where I have open capacity by role. And I can get down to the named person also. So, I've got a lot of data migration specialists available, but I can see in this case, Harold, we've over allocated. So, we're going to allow you to either view it by role or, again, if you've got things grouped by department or location or skill or whatever, you're going to be able to group things by whatever attribute you want to group things by. So what happens then? The PMs and the RMs are getting together, or maybe the executive team gets together and say, okay, we got a real problem here. I've got no way to hire any additional audit managers or creative directors or clinical writers or data migration specialists. So you got two choices, right? You have the option of saying, all right, well, what work do we have going on at that time? So you can either say, all right, let's look at which projects are going on and look at what their priorities might be. And so maybe we'll say, all right, well, one option is we slip this project out. So we're trying to get rid of that over allocation because we can't have a over allocation because we can't hire anymore. So what if we slip that out? Show me the impact of that slippage. And then in this case, it's showing me in real time my allocation before and what's my allocation after, my allocation before, and my allocation after. Now we have a lot of over allocations we still have to deal with, but I'm focusing on this one here. So we can see that we fix that over allocation by slipping a project out. That's just one option we have with the PMs and the RMs saying, okay, well, can we move this project out? That'll help us alleviate this over allocation, as an example. Some other things that we see people doing is, if I go look at this view, we may have the case where we might say, hey, this particular project, what if we just cancel this employee seminar training? So, we're over allocated. We're just not going to be able to get to it right now. So what if we just don't do it? So let's exclude it. And now let's look at the impact by doing that. And in this case, it was training for our audit managers. I could see we were over allocated. Now we're under allocated. We weren't quite over allocated. Here we were out in April. So we basically said, let's assume we're just not going to do that training. So again, you're communicating with your people saying, all right, this one we might have to not do. Or you might, as I mentioned before, say, hey, this project we're just going to delay. Or you might say, what if we just spread that out over a longer period of time? So in this environment we're in today, or even, post-COVID, we can say, and again, I'm sure many of you are going through this right today. You're doing what if scenarios today, because you're always in your meetings going, what if we do this? What if we do that? And so think about how you're doing that today, whether you're using Excel, whether you're using Project Online, Clarity, ServiceNow, whatever it is, some audit management tool. It's not easy to be able to do this what if analysis and do that resource manager, project manager communication. Now, other communication that comes up, right? This is a live case study that I know comes up all the time, is that maybe there's new projects you've got to do now. So it could be, if you're a bank and financial institution, you got to quickly put in a new system where you can collect all of the requests for the loans that are coming out from the government, right? So you got to either build a new system or change a new system, or maybe you've got some new regulatory requirements. And so you just would like to know, hey, when could we slot it in based on the resources we have? So you could say, show me when I could slot it in. The system's going to say, all right, based on the resources you got, here's when I can slot it in when 100% of them are available. Now, sounds great in a perfect world. You might say, yeah, no problem. We'll do that in 2022. But let's say it's some system you go, hey, no way, we can't live with that. Assume I've got less resources because I got to get it done earlier. So let's say we've got to kick this off in May. Great. Let me show you where your gaps are going to be. Well, Beverly, you've over allocated. You don't have enough analysts. So you might say, I don't care. We have to do this. This is urgent. So let's assume we're going to do it on that date, because now we're going to move some other work around, right? So you might then say, all right, so let's assume we got to get this regulatory project in. Great, this Giro Phase 13 project was going on at the same time. So what I'm going to ask is, when could we slot that one in where we have no gaps? Great. We're going to move this one way out here. So let's go assume we're going to move it out here. We'll still have to deal with Angela, but everybody else is good. So now I'm going to move that project out. So if you can think about in real time, communicating the resource load you've got versus all the work you're taking place, and to be able to do this what if analysis and communicate that RM PM in real time here. You can be doing this live online, or as probably many of you are doing now, you're just flipping emails back and forth, or you're on Skype and you're trying to do it that way. This makes it really easy to do that what if. Some other what ifs I see, in sad to say, but in some cases, we just did a WebEx here earlier, is let's say you go, you know what, we're going to have to reduce our consultants just because we've got to reduce our budget. So you might say, I have a decrease of 1% of, I don't want to say this, but let's say 50% decrease. So you might say, I'm going to reduce by 50% my available consultants that I'm going to use. You might have your existing staff. So you might want to know what's going to be the impact. Well, I can see real quick, I'm going to have an over allocation, but let's assume we're going to have a 50% impact. I'm going to apply that. So I just reduced my resources or my consultants by 50%. And so now it's going to at least let me know where I'm going to have an issue and what those months are, and then show me, well, what are all the projects I've got my consultants on? So now you might be able to say, all right, well, maybe this one we're going to slip out. Maybe we're going to put it on hold, right? Because I'm just going to have to assume we're going to have to live with that. So again, if I look at my consultants, now I'm good to go. You know, again, I was going to be over allocated, or I was going to have too much work for the number of staff. So now I can live with that. So in real time, headcount reduction, we can always add back real quick. We can always reduce our projects. We can slip projects out. We can put projects on hold. Again, all of the things you're doing is you're communicating between your resource managers and your project managers doing this what if. This is true, again, whether it's audits that are taking place and or products that you're delivering. We've got a lot of medical device manufacturing companies that use Tempus. We have a lot of government agencies that are using Tempus that this is impacting. We have a lot of consulting companies that this is impacting. They're having to change, not going on site for work, and still instead they're doing a lot more remote work. We've got law firms around the world that are changing the way they're doing their business. So again, I'm really just kind of giving you a sense that whether you have a process where you want to automate that with this resource requesting internally, or whether you're just wanting to get off Excel, or whether you're wanting to create what we call scenario plans or models, we make it very easy for you to be able to do that type of what if analysis. Now, we also give you a lot more capability than this. Some of you are managing budgets, so we can track finances. Some of you want to capture actual hours from your team members. We can do that. And in some cases, you're just wanting to get a better view into things like where you're over allocated and under allocated, right? So you might be wanting to look at, you know, based on my capacity, just don't have enough. I'm going to be over allocated. And again, whether you're looking at this by team, by department, by location, by country, by group, we're going to have all that kind of capability available to you. Whether you're building those reports directly in here, really simple and easily, or whether some of you I know might be using other reporting tools, and we have the ability to connect to those with our data warehouse connector. And by the way, I'm just going to show you real quick, creating a simple report is literally drag and drop. A lot of you are familiar with doing pivot style reports. So I might say I want to do a resource report here. Maybe I want to group things by my employment basis. And maybe you want to look at your measures. So I want to take a look at planned hours. Right, so just a quick report, look at planned hours. If I want to drop my projects in, I could drop my projects in menu. You're familiar with this, right? Or put my projects up above, either one. So, you know, here's my project. And if I wanted to put resource names in, but again, creating reports as well as doing graphical kind of reports where you're wanting to look at over and under allocations. So let's just say I want to look at a report by month. Let's go out to here, and I want to look at my allocation, and I want to look at my base capacity. I want to line, and I just created one of those. So again, very easy to create those kind of supply demand charts where whether it's the resource manager or the project manager wanting to know where we've got our capacity, where we've got our challenges that we have to deal with. And again, as I mentioned, whether you're doing whether you're wanting to view this data in more of the heat map style or in more of the tabular, where you're looking at where I might have challenges related to hours over allocated, hours available, or headcount, where I'm going to be short headcount, or maybe this is related to budgets or finance or hours, and you're looking at day, week, month, quarter, or you're looking, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years out. This is going to give you that real-time capability to view that. So with that being said, we spent some time, sorry about that. This is the wrong webinar, which we just did right before this one. When we look at communicating between our resource managers and our project managers, there's a lot of ways that we can do that, whether we're automating it and whether we're doing it through the what if model, and wanted to give you a sense of that. So really appreciate your time today on the session. I will send a copy of the slides. I will send you a copy of this recording. I'll stay on for a couple of minutes here. If you have any questions, and I see I've got one in here, I'm going to answer that right now. Let me go take a look. Nope, looks like there are no more questions. All right. So we can set up a demo. We also have free trials, so we have no problem giving you access to the system and letting you testing it out to see if it would be a fit for you. But have an excellent day, have an excellent week. Feel free to email me with any questions, and have a great day. Talk to you soon.